Somebody from the tournament came to find me in Toronto and told me they were moving my match. Not the time, the court. And my first thought, before anything else, was that I had done something wrong. Because in 10 years on this tour, the only time anybody moves your match is when there is a problem. He explained that the grandstand holds 2,800 people and they'd already sold more than 5,000 tickets for the slot, and they were putting me on center court instead, which holds 10,000. I stood there and did the arithmetic twice because I thought I'd misheard. 5,000 tickets for a second round match against a player ranked outside the top 100 on a Wednesday night. 30 minutes. And that is how long the tickets took to sell once the draw went public. Around 3,100 of them in half an hour. And then more. And then the venue was wrong. I have been on this tour since I was 17, and for most of that time I played on courts numbered 5 and 6 and 9. The ones where the crowd is 100 people and half of them are watching the match on the next court over. That is not a complaint. That is the correct place for a player ranked 140. And I understood that completely and I never resented it. You will learn a particular thing playing on outer courts that you cannot learn anywhere else, which is how to generate your own occasion. When nobody is watching, the match still has to matter to you. And if you cannot make it matter on your own, then you will never be able to handle a stadium. I got very good at making it matter on my own. Then they told me they had bumped a higher ranked player to a smaller court to fit me on the main one. And that is where the whole thing stopped feeling like a nice story and started feeling like something I had to think about carefully, because that is not how the sport works. Court assignments are a hierarchy. Rankings decide them and everybody accepts it. And the system exists for a reason. And they broke it for a Filipina ranked outside the top 15. Not because I had earned it in the way the system measures earning, but because of who comes to watch. The center court sold out to 10,000 people on a Wednesday night in Toronto. Somebody told me afterward that the last player to do that on a Wednesday, there was Serena Williams, 20 years ago. I heard that and I did not know what to do with my face. That is the honest reaction. Somebody says your name and Serena's in the same sentence about a ticketing statistic, and there is no appropriate response available. So I think I just said something about the crowd being amazing, and then I went to my room and sat on the bed for a while. The tournament director said he had never seen a player ranked outside the top 5 have that kind of pull, and that people appeared to be waiting for my match to be scheduled before buying tickets at all. Waiting for my match to be scheduled. That sentence has been in my head for 2 weeks. There is a practical side to a bigger court that nobody mentions, and it genuinely affected how I played that night. Center court is a different tennis environment from grandstand. The ball flies differently in a 10,000 seat bowl because the air moves differently, the background behind the server changes, the distance to the back wall changes, how you judge a lob. I had practiced that week on outside courts. Nobody schedules a player ranked outside the top 15 for a center court practice session. So I walked out to play a second round match in a stadium I had never hit a ball in conditions I had never felt, in front of 10,000 people who had bought tickets specifically to be there. I won that match in 3 sets, and it took me the whole first set to work out how the ball was behaving. 6-1, 4-6, 6-2. If somebody wants a reason for that middle set, that is the reason. And it is not an excuse, because it is also a completely reasonable price for what I was being given. Washington was where it started properly, and I did not see it coming there either. The crowd was Filipino from the first point of my first match, and it stayed that way through 6 matches and a rain delay and a final that finished on a Monday. Flags in every section, not a group of them in one corner. Everywhere, spread through the stadium like the building had been rented out. And they put chicken adobo on the concessions menu. An American tennis tournament in Washington added a Filipino dish to the food they sell because of the people who were coming. I laughed when I found out, and then about an hour later, I did not find it funny anymore. I found it enormous, because a tournament changes its menu when it has understood something about who is in the building. And what they had understood was that this was not a normal crowd having a normal day out. The player who got moved to the smaller court is the part of this I have not resolved, and I am not going to pretend otherwise for the sake of a clean story. She was ranked higher than me. She had earned her position through results, the way everybody is supposed to, and the system that puts higher-ranked players on bigger courts exists precisely so that earning something means something. And she was moved because of ticket sales driven by a community that has nothing to do with her. I would be upset. If I were her, I would be upset, and if anybody had done that to me 2 years ago, I would have found it very difficult to be gracious about. Nobody said anything to me. The locker room has been completely normal. But I know that decision was made, and I know who it affected, and it is one of the uncomfortable things sitting underneath a week everybody wants to describe as a fairy tale. Commercial pull and sporting merit are not the same currency, and the sport is going to have to decide how it feels about that. And it is not my decision to make, and I benefit from it, which makes anything I say about it slightly compromised. My whole childhood is the reason all of this lands the way it does, and I do not think I can explain it properly to people who did not grow up somewhere small in tennis terms. I left the Philippines at 12 years old to go to an academy in Spain, alone, into a language I did not speak, with no Filipina before me who had done anything close to what I was attempting. There was no path, nobody to copy, and there was also nobody watching, which is the part that matters here. For years I played tournaments where the only Filipino in the building was me. Junior events, small professional tournaments, qualifying draws in cities where nobody knew where the Philippines was on a map, and I would finish a match and there would be nobody there, and I would call home, and that was the whole support structure. 10,000 people in Toronto on a Wednesday. I do not have a way of connecting those two facts inside my own head. They are both true and they are about the same person, and there is a straight line between them, and I still cannot walk along it. What people get wrong is that they think this is about me. It is not, and I've become quite firm about this over the last few months. Those tickets are not being bought because somebody wants to watch a particular player hit a forehand. They are being bought because there's a community that has waited a very long time to have somebody in this sport. And the tickets are how they are saying it. I am the occasion. I am not the reason. The reason is that there are Filipinos in Toronto and Washington and Dubai and Rome and London who have been living in those cities for 20 or 30 years. And for the first time, there is a tennis tournament where they can show up together and be loud in their own way about somebody from home. And the tennis is almost incidental to what is happening in those stands. Understanding that changed how the pressure feels, and it took me a while to arrive at it. For a period earlier this year, the crowd made things harder. That sounds ungrateful, and it is not. It is just accurate. Walking onto a court knowing 10,000 people have organized their entire day around you adds something to your chest. That is not helpful at 4 all in a second set. I was carrying them. That was the mistake. I thought the noise was an obligation, and obligations are heavy. What I understand now is that they are not asking me for a result. They came for the flag and the noise and each other, and whether I win is the smaller part of their afternoon. Once I worked that out, the weight went, and what was left was just the sound. And the sound is the best thing I have ever heard on a tennis court. Losing in front of them is the part I have had to make peace with separately. I lost in Toronto in the 4th round with nothing left in my legs, and I lost in Cincinnati last week in the 3rd round. And both times the flags were still up at the end, and they were still making noise at 5-2 down when the match was clearly finished. That is not what a normal crowd does. A normal crowd goes quiet when the result becomes obvious. Mine got louder, and I could not work out what to do with that other than keep playing until it ended. This shirt happened last week, and it was the strangest one of all. Nike made a t-shirt with my name on it, and it sold out in minutes. And somebody told me it sold out before the merchandise for players who are much bigger names than I am. I posted about it on Instagram because I was excited in a completely uncomplicated way, the way you would be about anything with your name on it. And then people were reviewing it on the website, asking for it to be restocked before the US Open, which is an entirely surreal thing to read about a piece of clothing that exists because of you. None of it is tennis, and all of it is happening because of tennis. And holding both of those in your head at the same time is a skill nobody teaches you at an academy. New York is going to be bigger than anything so far, and I know that already. and there is an enormous Filipino community in New York and New Jersey, larger than Toronto, larger than Washington. If I get a night match in Ash, there will be a section of that stadium that sounds like nothing that tournament has heard, and I have started thinking about what that will actually be like rather than pretending I have not. 23,000 people. Ash is the biggest tennis stadium in the world, and I will walk out there seated for the first time in my career at a Grand Slam, the highest seating any Filipino has ever had at a major. I have thought about what I would say to the version of myself who was 12 years old, getting on a plane by herself. Not about the trophies, because she would not have believed those, and they would not have helped her. Anyway, about the crowd, about the fact that one day a tournament in Canada would have to move her match to a bigger stadium. She would not have believed that either. She was worried about the language and about whether the other kids at the academy would talk to her. I have been the most active player on the tour this year, 56 matches, more than anybody, and there is a version of this press conference where I complain about that, about the schedule and the travel and the body, and I have complained about it before and I will probably complain about it again, not today. Because the reason I have played 56 matches is that I kept getting the chance to, and 11 years ago, the entire problem was that nobody was giving me a chance at all. My mother said something on the phone after Toronto that I have not repeated to anybody until now. She said she had spoken to people back home who had never watched a tennis match in their lives and were now setting alarms for 2 in the morning for a second round match at a tournament in Canada. That is the number that actually gets me, not 10,000 in a stadium, because those people were already in Toronto and it was an evening out. People at home in Manila and Cebu and Davao waking up in the middle of the night for a match that does not decide anything in a sport most of them did not follow 18 months ago. I cannot see those people. There is no version of a stadium that contains them, but they are the actual audience, and the 10,000 in Toronto are just the visible fraction of it. Somebody asked me whether the attention has changed how I practice, and it has in one way. My practice sessions draw crowds now, actual crowds, hundreds of people watching a training session, which was not a thing that happened to me a year ago and is not a thing that happens to most players ranked around me. That took adjusting to. A practice court is where you look bad on purpose. It is where you hit the shot you are not good at 300 times, badly. Doing that in front of 400 people who came to see you is a different exercise, and I had to decide whether to keep practicing honestly or stop performing, so I kept practicing honestly. It looks worse. It is the only way to get better, and the people who come to watch deserve the real thing, rather than a show. They moved my match to a bigger court, and that sentence is going to stay with me for a long time, and not because of the compliment inside it, because of what it means about a country that had never had this, and about a 12-year-old on a plane to a place she had never been, and about 10,000 people on a Wednesday night in a city none of us are from. The grandstand was too small. That is a strange thing to be told, and a stranger thing to still be thinking about 2 weeks later, and I do not expect to get used to it, and I am not sure I want to.
And maybe that is what this story is really about. Not the 10,000 people, not the sold-out tickets, and not even the center court. It is about a 12-year-old girl from the Philippines who got on a plane alone and entered a world where nobody knew her name, yet she refused to give up. Back then, there was no crowd waiting for her. Now, entire stadiums are. But the most beautiful part is that she no longer walks onto the court alone. Behind her are millions of people who see more than just a tennis player. They see their home, their country, and their dreams. And one day, when 23,000 people are screaming her name inside the biggest stadium in tennis, she may finally understand what that little girl could never have imagined. The grandstand was too small, but the dream never was. Because sometimes, you spend years fighting for your place in the world, only to discover that an entire community was waiting for someone exactly like you. This is bigger than tennis. This is a country finally finding its voice on the world stage. And if this is what happened when nobody expected her, imagine what happens next.